Just this week, you retweeted to your 87 million followers a conspiracy theory that Joe Biden orchestrated to have SEAL Team 6, the Navy SEAL Team 6, killed to cover up the fake death of bin Laden. Now, why would you send a lie like that to your followers? You retweeted
That was a retweet.
Are you intimidated? Why hasn't the FBI taken over the Nancy Guthrie case as the lead investigator? Do you have any updates on how that's going?
Well, they took it over originally. It was a local case originally, and they didn't want to let go of it, which is fine. It's up to them. It's really up to the community. But ultimately, when the FBI got involved, I think, progress has been made.
Those are free-falling drops and are rather large. Do you see the tiny ones in there? In my opinion, I think those are expert droppings. So what that means is there's something going on in the nose or the mouth, and that's as a result of probably expirating or kind of coughing like this.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
4 years ago, Nancy Guthrie wrote that she wanted to buy a doorbell camera and she wanted to know what the best doorbell camera brand was. She said nothing that expressed any concern for her own safety. Instead, Nancy Guthrie said all she wanted to see was which animals might wander by at night. Meanwhile, the New York Times has published that most difficult of all research pieces, an illuminating bio on Nancy Guthrie. That sort of information is always tough to source. You have to knock on doors, gain people's trust in Nancy's inner circle, but most important, patiently listen. And why is it important that we get to know this person? Because there was something about Nancy that caught the attention of someone else, her abductor, somewhere along the line. And the question is, where, how, and when? And that might give us an indication as to who. In terms of how, well, we know generally how this could take place.
No, he covets. That is his nature. And how do we begin to covet, Clarice? Now, we begin by coveting what we see every day.
And that might be how the abductor, that might address how the abductor got to see Nancy. And so knowing Nancy's movements, especially those movements close to the time that she was taken, may provide critical clues. According to the New York Times, born and raised in northern Kentucky, Ms. Guthrie attended the University of Kentucky, blazing a path as a college journalist decades before Savannah Guthrie would become a morning show fixture on NBC and basically a household name. Nancy Guthrie, then Nancy Long, covered fraternity and sorority life as the society editor of the student newspaper, penning a column called Social Whirl. Now let me ask you something. Do you think this dude trying to cover the camera with flowers, do you think he has a college education? If he did have a college education, do you think he would be moonlighting as a wannabe abductor? Anyway, back to the Times. She and her husband Charles Guthrie met on a blind date at a basketball game, and we know that because that's what Savannah Guthrie said on one of her shows. They actually married in 1963, and the family moved to Australia, where Mr. Guthrie worked as a mining engineer. So the family has actually gotten around. They've traveled. Do you think that our suspect has traveled? Do you think he is married? Do you think he has a job? Do you think he owns or rents? Do you think he has kids? Does he even have a pet? According to the Times, they moved back to Arizona and bought a low-slung home in 1975 in the cactus-studded Catalina foothills just north of Tucson, a home Ms. Guthrie has lived in for more than 50 years. So Nancy has lived in a home without incident for 50 years. So what made January of 2026, this year, this time, different? In 50 years? What do you think was different? I've told you guys to look at her social media, and that's also a way that someone could covet, right? People can also covet what they see every day might actually be social media. But those posts are quite unique because what's been happening is also quite unique. but apparently many of you don't seem to think so. Anyway, besides what she was doing on social media, what else was Nancy doing in her spare time? Well, according to the New York Times, Nancy taught Bible study classes with friends, saying that she had a special ability to make the lessons applicable to everyday life. She's been a mentor and a teacher and someone that's really quietly shaped the lives of countless people here, said Vicky Edwards, 68, who became close friends with Miss Guthrie after meeting at one such class in 1987. And it was her den where the friends watched their Sunday services. Now, that's also something Nancy has been doing for years. In 1998, Nancy's husband died suddenly of a heart attack, what Savannah Guthrie called a stark dividing line in the family's story. She was 16 at the time.
You've lost your dad.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because I think sometimes people know, I did lose my dad when I was a teenager. I was 16.
So you see, criminals aren't the only people who have known suffering, who have known hardship. Sometimes the well-to-do go through trauma as well. Sometimes they have battles and must learn to fight their way back to some kind of happiness. Sometimes they've got to overcome grief without, of course, turning to crime. Anyway, back to the Times. Nancy Guthrie had never worked full-time outside the home, but she landed a job at a small business newspaper, the Daily Territorial, eventually parlaying it into a career at the University of Arizona, which Savannah Guthrie attended, spending college close to home. Colleagues who knew Ms. Guthrie from her time at the University of Arizona said she was a skilled communicator who never chased publicity. When funding cuts threatened to shut down a poison information center in the mid-1990s, I wonder if that was like snake poison or scorpion poison or spider. I wonder what that was about. Anyway, she plunged into a campaign to gather 20,000 signatures and urge Arizona politicians to save it, according to Jacqueline Sharkey, a former colleague who organized the effort. And guess what? It succeeded. Again, one can see that Nancy is something of a political animal and also someone with a moral backbone. She seems to have a sense of mission about her life that goes beyond just herself. I wonder if the abductor is the same, a political animal but perhaps of some other ilk, and without a moral backbone, and someone who's quite selfish and thinks very much just about himself. The Times goes on to note, Nancy Guthrie left her job at the University of Arizona in 2007, so 19 years ago, and spent several years afterward serving on an advisory committee for the journalism school. Dave Coulier, a former director of that school, said that Nancy kept him in check. Nancy appears to be someone with agency, someone who's quite independent, also someone with influence and a strong social circle. The fact that no one so far seems to know who our abductor is or recognize him suggests we might be dealing with not only a loner, but a loser. Back to the Times. She was quick to correct me, Mr. Coulier said. She was just one of those people who you really appreciated getting to work with. Now, do you think the same can be said about the abductor? Do people like being with that person? Do people like working with that person? Do people like that person just in general? Or is someone who's wandering around at about 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night, Sunday night, an antisocial person? Why has he become antisocial? Anyway, back to the Times. For much of her time in Arizona, Nancy embraced the outdoors, playing tennis. Could that be where she encountered this guy? Hiking. Could that be where she encountered this guy? Joining spinning classes. She enjoyed cooking for friends and eating out, and would sometimes see movies at an art house cinema. Now, does the abductor strike you as someone with any cultural interests? Do you think he reads about herbs and botany? Do you think he does some gardening in his spare time? Or do you think he plays video games in his spare time and perhaps shoots at the local gun range? Does he like to drink alcohol, perhaps use other substances? But the hiking thing is interesting. The abductor is wearing what could be considered a hiking bag. And has he ever used it for that purpose? And his shoes look like one could wear those on a trail as well. What about those shoes? Are they a military issue? What are they typically for? What is the main? Because shoes often have a kind of a specific purpose. Tennis, running, hiking. Could Nancy have bumped into this bozo on a nearby trail? What is the nearest trail to her home. I can't really imagine that because I think Nancy had trouble walking. So I think hiking is something that is sort of more into a distant backstory. According to the New York Times, as Nancy aged, things became more difficult. She told one friend, Chris Federer, that she no longer felt comfortable going to a movie theater up a flight of stairs, only half-jokingly referring to it as a fire trap. She had a pacemaker and relied on daily medication, and she began using a cane and powerful hearing aids. In recent years, she often stayed at home, where she kept the windows open in the summer. Now, another possibility here is, was she someone who regularly went to a pharmacy? If she was relying on daily medication, was that medication ever delivered? And so what she would do is she would keep the windows open in the summer. She would write in her journal on her patio. And who may have been able to see her doing that? How about someone working on the roof, someone working in her garden, someone delivering something? She also played Wordle and read books that publishers had sent to Savannah. Now, who would be delivering these books and how regularly? And what was the last delivery? If Nancy was home most of the time, isn't this where someone saw her and where the coveting began? Didn't this somebody also realize she was particularly vulnerable when he encountered her at the door, where she struggled to even walk to the door? And didn't he think to himself, easy peasy? But she was still sharp, friends said, and rarely complained about her back pain or other problems. And she still had a buzzing social life, never missing a monthly book club meeting. So you can see books feature strongly in her interests. And that is why he knew he'd have to strike late at night over a weekend, because there were a lot of visitors. On January 26th, the day before her birthday, so her birthday was the 27th, and she was abducted on the 31st, 4 days later, 4 days after her birthday. Is that important? Is that part of the timeline important? Anyway, Ms. Federer dropped off a balloon and treats on her doorstep. The next day, was that dropped off personally or was that via some kind of delivery service? Anyway, the next day, Ms. Burnson, who has family roots in New Orleans, set out some nice crystal, cooked shrimp and grits and made beignets. Now, is it possible that someone heard it was Nancy's 84th birthday and perhaps delivered something to her home? A gift, a book. What deliveries did she receive for her birthday, possibly from Amazon? Going back to the article, at the Mahjong game 2 days before her disappearance, Ms. Guthrie was dressed casually on a chilly day, laughing with her friends and, as usual, playing strategically. The next evening, Nancy had dinner and played games with her daughter Annie and her son-in-law Tommaso Sioni at their home before Mr. Sioni drove her back to her house. Now, for those who can't let go of the theory that her own daughter kidnapped her, and by the way, I suggest this might say something more about your own relationships with family and your own paranoia and distrust of others. I mean, why would they play games with her if they harbored ill intent?
You didn't expect that, did you? Did you? No.
I mean, when last did you play games with your mother or your father? That's typically a sign of a close relationship and even a friendship. Anyway, hours later, after she was dropped off, as we know, Nancy's Nest doorbell camera captured not a wild animal, not a stray dog, but the still unknown masked man at her door. Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.